This video is now in session. The Supreme Court, one of the most well-known pieces of American politics, one of the biggest and most revered institutions of American society, and I think that the Supreme Court is being overrated. Now, I'm going to extend this video to be more than just about the Supreme Court being overrated, but here are my arguments. For the Supreme Court, there are 9 justices on it, and if we compare the Supreme Court to all the other courts in the United States, then you'll see that the Supreme Court doesn't actually have as big of a function as you think the Supreme Court has. And the main reason why I think it's overrated is because we are focusing way too much attention on the Supreme Court, while we're focusing nearly no attention on the district courts and the U.S. Court of Appeals. Now, if you don't know what these two other courts are, then that already shows how the Supreme Court gets way too much attention in comparison to these 2 other courts. But pretty much how district courts and Court of Appeals works is that if you want to get a case that relates to, let's just say you have like a case on LGBTQ rights, then that would not go to the Supreme Court first, but that would actually go to the district court first. Now, depending on where you file this case, then it will go to that district court. So let's say, for example, you filed it in the Central District of California, or if you filed it in Los Angeles. If you filed it in Los Angeles, then it would go to the Central District of California. And then from there, if that case goes your way, then great. But if that case doesn't go in your way, then you can appeal it to the U.S. Court of Appeals. That's literally what it does. It deals with appeals. So what it would then do is then it would go from the Central District, the Central District of California to the 9th District, not the 9th District, but rather the 9th Court of Appeals. So the 9th Court of Appeals has broad jurisdiction, like all the other Court of Appeals. It has Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Arizona, Alaska, Marianas Islands, Guam, and Hawaii. So with this, the Court of Appeals then decides on that case, and then if you don't get the ruling that you wanted, then you can appeal again to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court can either accept or reject the application. And the same thing applies to the appeals court. You can appeal from the district court to the appeals court, but the appeals court may not accept the case. So then it would revert back to the lower court's ruling. So why I think these 2 court systems are underrated in comparison to the Supreme Court is that for these 2 courts, they accept much more cases and much broader cases. If we look at the district courts, there are many district courts, and they deal with a lot of legal cases that don't just relate to the Bill of Rights, or like the 14th, 15th, First, Fourth, and Fourth Amendment, all of those amendments. So as a result, I think that largely the Supreme Court is overrated in comparison to these 2 courts, and that's due to all of the political shenanigans going on in the Supreme Court, and as well as the media trying to portray the Supreme Court as the arbiter of all the justice cases that are pursued, and that's not really true, because Supreme Court justices, they do serve for a very long time, for life, unless if they retire, so that can be up to 50 years, but they're not deciding policy cases. They're deciding like LGBTQ cases, abortion cases, and maybe that's just me being a little bit ignorant there, but the U.S. Court of Appeals and the U.S. District Courts also accept those kinds of cases. They rule on those kinds of cases, and those kinds of cases sometimes don't even go to the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court can only accept a few limited cases per year, so that they don't get overloaded with cases. They used to accept like more than 150 cases, I believe. Now it's way less. It's now just in the double digits. And that makes sense mainly because that time it was way too much work for the Supreme Court. But now they're a little more. I wouldn't say they're more leisurely doing their work, but they now have more, I guess, of a break. So that's why I think the Supreme Court is overrated. But I want to transition this over to how the U.S. Capitol and the executive branch then relate to the Supreme Court and all of the political shenanigans that are going on. Because earlier I mentioned about how a lot of politicians overvalue the Supreme Court and they do it purposefully. So, yeah, when you hear, I'd say that the Supreme Court is overrated, but at the same time, I'd say that politicians should not be touching the Supreme Court. At least they shouldn't be touching the institution of the Supreme Court or the groundwork of it, because currently we have a couple politicians, mainly from the Democratic side, who say that we need to pack the courts. We need to expand the amount of seats on the Supreme Court. We have to expand the Court of Appeals and the district courts to have more seats, so then we can have Biden judges, or not Biden judges, but like doctorless judges or living constitutionalists. So that's their argument, but for that I'd say nah, because the Supreme Court, if you try to add more seats, you're mainly calling for the Republicans to also do the same thing in the future. And ultimately, the last thing we need is one branch of the government actively controlling the other branch of the government whenever they are in power. So that's a horrible idea in my opinion. And it extends not just from the Supreme Court, but also to the district and appellate courts. Democrats accuse Republicans of undermining institutions in the U.S. government, but if they're going to pack the courts, then they're calling hypocrisy on themselves, because essentially what they're saying is if they're packing the courts, then they're saying that, oh, we also don't have to follow the decorum of our institution. Before I want to sign off, I have one other thing to address about the Supreme Court, which is about the originalist judges or justices in the Federalist Society. So this includes people like Samuel Alito, Justice Alito, or even Justice Thomas. So for these two justices, I'd say that they are not helping their case of trying to keep Supreme Court institutions intact. They are definitely not helping their cause. Because right now you see Justice Alito and Justice Thomas engaging in political debates or policy matters. If you heard Alito's Federalist Society speech last year, then you'll know how he went pretty political in that. And there's always a rule, there's always not a hard written rule about not being political as a Supreme Court justice. It's not a hard written rule. It's more just following past precedent. But if Alito really wants to have the Supreme Court kept intact, then they should not be dealing with the legislative branch's work. They should not be tapping into that, just like how the legislative branch should not be tapping into the Supreme Court and the Judicial Branch by expanding the amount of seats that it has. So that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.